Hello there. I want to get back into drawing with dip pens. Last time we talked about the supplies you needed, and we went over short hatching, long hatching, and cross hatching. A couple of things I left out. Whenever you work, you want to, aside from having the pen, you also want a wet paper towel. Now, I use this because as you draw, the ink starts to dry up around the pen, and eventually it gets gummed up and your lines become harder to control and a lot uglier. So what I do every once in a while after drawing is I'll go through and just clean the pen tip off. That way when I go back in, my lines are nicer and fresher looking. You also want a dry paper towel aside from the wet one. Dry paper towel will help with any small spills. If you spill like a dot or something like that, all you have to do is make a little point with the paper towel, touch it to the spill, and most of the spill will suck up right into the paper towel, and just let the rest of it dry. Alright, today what I want to go over is just how to use the pen when you're drawing. I didn't talk about this necessarily. When you look at it, this is the top of the pen and this is the bottom of the pen. So whenever you draw, the curve should be facing like skyward towards you. Okay, and how the pen works, there's a little reservoir here, a slit in the pen, and then you have these two independent metal springs. If I can get it focused. Right? And when you press down on it, the pressure will allow those little metal tines to flex outward, and then when you relieve the pressure, they'll flex back inwards. And this will give you your line weight. Now, one of the techniques I love to use when I'm doing this to fill in background, because it's so easy, is I like to use what I call random small hatching. And all I do is take and start filling the area with small hatch lines. This is a great way to get area filled. It's also a great way to easily do gradients, because all you have to do a gradient inside this is just take your lines, make them a little smaller, and move them a little further apart, and it'll be easier for you to go from light lines to dark lines. And if you do it small enough, you'll get a nice consistent fill in the area. Now if you're doing this and you want it to look more like a pattern, like say you're doing clothing or something like that, you can really make sure that your directionals go exactly opposite of each other, and it'll look a lot more like fabric. Or it'll give you a consistent pattern for anything else you might want to draw, whether it be furniture or clothing. The next one I want to go over is stippling. Stippling's a nice way to get light texture on things that are far away, and consistent tonal transitions. And all stippling is you're laying down individual points. When you stipple, you want to make sure it's never really making noise. If you start slapping this pen down, you're going to run the risk of making the ink all flow down the little slit and just blop out all over your paper and leave you with nasty little marks. Now when you stipple, you want to try to make it random and not go in consistent lines all over the place. All you have to do is press it slightly less hard and move it further away to lighten your stipple. Press a little harder or leave the pen on the paper a little bit longer and cluster them closer together. And it'll get a nice transition from light to dark. The last thing I want to do is I want you to work on the flexibility of the pen in trying to give yourself a nice gradient. So you want to start with a nice thin line and press harder. Start with the thin line, press harder, and just do this over and over again until your lines are nice and straight and you get a good feeling for the ink flow on your pen. So each line should try and look a little thinner at the top than it is at the bottom. You should also have a lot less coffee than I do in the morning to make these lines look a lot straighter. Alright, that's about it for today. Talk to you again soon.